6 p.m. and the first item is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the next item on the agenda is correspondence, visitors, and public comments.
So I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Tracy Pilvin, and I am expressing my interest in the board seat that's open for Highgate. I can tell you a little bit about myself, or is this short and sweet? Or
It's usually, we have, well, I don't know,
That's
so
you.
we have two candidates. The other one couldn't make it tonight because MVU stepped up day, so I put both of them in the drive, and then we would just, unless anybody wants to hear anything.
Yeah, I did this last year, so.
okay, I'll make it short and sweet. I was born and raised in Franklin County. I'm a Missisquoi Valley Union graduate. I have served in the military for 27 years and still serving in the Air Force. I'm a registered nurse of 20 years. I've actually served on the Missisquoi Valley Board for almost 6 years, from 2009 and 2014. So short and sweet, the reason I want to serve again is just to, I felt like the one word I could say about serving on a board is rewarding. I think it's very rewarding to serve on a board that shapes our future for the kids and in the district at large. So in a nutshell, that's who I am. That's why I want to serve again. It's just I want to be back. I've been back in the area for almost 2 years now. And I'd really like to, again, contribute to the community that I live in and the students. I think they have a lot to navigate these days, and I would just like to be a positive member of that shaping. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have anybody, doesn't look like we have anybody online.
You got me.
I was waiting, just wanted to make sure I got everybody's.
I don't know if everybody knows me. I am James Sullivan. I am a Ag Advisory Committee Chairperson. There's come up a lot of issues, so we're going to have a lot of things to deal with. And I've been doing this, I think, 2016, 17, and I spent 3 years just going to board meetings and bringing things going before COVID, and then COVID hit, and we had some other things were going good, and now things are sliding back down again. We have, like I say, I've been told a lot of different issues. We've been having meetings. Dan Palmer has been calling the meetings. I thought that would be a good idea to get more people involved, and he knows, where he knows people's schedules and can schedule different things, because I always had trouble getting members to come. I have 4 members at the time. One of the teachers now, Elizabeth Sweet, was on my board, so now that she's a teacher, she's no longer on my board. But I have Heather Bissett from H&B Greenhouse, Guy Schwarner, a farmer up in Highgate, Laura Gagne, who I believe is a vet or vet tech, and her husband does sugaring, and who am I forgetting? Probably somebody.
Richard Flint.
Richard Flint.
Richard Flint, thank you, Dan. Local Highgate, I think he's involved with the town, used to be on the school board. So I have some good people behind me. But like I say, we have a lot of things that are happening. I've been working with Dan, talking with him, and discussing things. I thought we had a good meeting last time and discussed what our students can do and get done as far as sugaring, land lab, and different things. And that kind of, from my understanding, got thrown around and somehow got turned into maybe possibly field studies taking on these things of our ag students, which, I'm sorry, we don't double dip, and So in course, the thing, I took a meeting with Jeff Benet, because my understanding was Jeff Benet originally donated and got involved with the field studies. And I had a pretty good meeting with him, and he was quite upset at a lot of things I told him that was going on. And he actually met with my teachers, one teacher that was available, and talked with them. I plan on having him at our next meeting. I'm hoping to call a meeting in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But yes, we have a big issue that come up to me. We have ag conventions that happen, and they expect, you know, our ag teachers to go to. And my understanding from the DL, which our department leader, went to say, we have a convention coming up and we may send people, and they said that they cannot use any monies to send people to these conventions. My problem is the ag department budgets in their budget for field trips for students, field trips for teachers to go to these. And looking through, so I got a budget. Looking through, it's about $7,000, maybe a little more, to pay for them to go to these trips. And now they're told that they cannot do that anymore. So if we have a change of protocol, I guess we need to be telling our teachers the change of protocol, because they've been doing this for years. I got 3 budgets showing staff money taken out in the budget for these trips. And if that has changed, then I guess we need to be telling our teachers of these protocols, because here's $7,000 or $8,000, $9,000 that went into the budget, and they're told they can't use it. That, for me, being a taxpayer, also is an issue. But again, with our 120 minutes we've been trying to get, which is a state recommended thing. We've been flying by night, doing 80 minutes in the morning and 80 minutes in the afternoon to cover our 120 minutes. The 122,000 that we got for ag this year from state, I've seen it as much as 180, and the reason it's dropping is because our students are not getting the 600 minutes that they need a week. So we had no tech students. The only reason we got money is because we have pre-tech. And the difference is, I believe pre-tech students get 800 from the state, where seniors, I believe, get 2,000. So that's why you see a drop in these numbers. But also, so like I say, I don't want to take up much more time, because I'd like to, I've heard now, you actually, with your committees, like your facility and your financing, that you have an ag committee, which is Don and Joanne, I believe. So maybe within the time when you call in them meetings, maybe I'll come to meetings and we can discuss more things. But I try and do it with the protocol through the DL, through administration. And when the DL is not pursuing these issues, he was told he couldn't do it, and he's not pursuing it enough. I find I'm not going to talk to the person that we're having the issue with, and that's why I come directly here. So like I say, we really, and I also recommend somebody needs, or even this board, call our ag department teachers and discuss with them the issues. Because, I mean, even Jim Macy, been there years, over 50, I believe. And he knows how this ag program should be run, and it's not being run the way it should be. So I recommend that I recommend that you meet with these teachers and discuss with him. We finally have a full complement of 5 teachers. We hired 3 teachers for this year, because we've been running on 2 or 3. We have 5 teachers this year, 3 new teachers. One of them, Elizabeth Sweet, this is her dream. This is what she wanted to do. She took this job because it's what she wanted to do, and it's her dream. And if we cannot accommodate our ag department, and it says right in your statements that you're all about our ag animal science, and if you cannot commit to this and do this properly, we're going to lose these 3 new teachers, because they're not going to do something if they can't get the commitment from the school board and the administration. But like I say, there's a lot of different issues, and I'm not going to get into them all tonight, but please, let's not lose this ag. Thank you.
Can I ask a question real quick, James?
Yes, sir.
Do you know which conference you're talking about in regards to them not being allowed to go?
There's some conference, I believe in Rhode Island, it's an ag conference that teachers go to where they learn new things about ag or whatever is coming up. And I guess they're conferences that they expect ag teachers to come to.
Okay, I've never heard of an ag conference going to Rhode Island.
Okay, I believe, I could be mistaken, I mean, if I'm lying, I've been lied to. But I believe I heard Rhode Island Ag Conference. And it was coming up, I believe, in April. But,
I'm totally unaware, this is the first I've heard of it. So.
see, that's why, Dan, I have a problem with the DL.
And I want to make sure that I am. But this, again, this is the first time I've heard of this one, so.
And that's my problem with the DL, if he's not gonna follow up. My understanding is he went to Jen DeSorga, and Jen DeSorga said he cannot use that money for that purpose. And when it's budgeted for that purpose, you look through the budget and it says right there, staff and FFA trips. Because even the FFA, I understand, with this money in the budget, FFA went to convention, and the money was taken out of the FFA account and not out of this budget money, which is wrong as far as I'm concerned.
Who would have made, Madam Chairman, who would have made the decision that the students in FFA took the money out of the FFA account? I mean, I thought we talked one time that they get supported like any other.
Absolutely, and we budget for those things. Any professional development or conferences or things like that. Dan is the director of that program as the administrator of the high school, and teachers have paperwork and requests to fill out, and if Dan hasn't heard of it, he has not, you know. So I think it's important that people speak directly with the principal or
I really appreciate Jim coming,
Yeah,
but my
I-
suggestion would be we move on the agenda and we wait for Dan Palmer to report back to us. And I think that's where the decision will be made.
Agreed. Any other public comments? Moving on to, thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
And any agenda reviews?
I don't have any changes now.
Thank you. Number 5 is presentation and discussion items of Franklin. Because it didn't change. Sorry. Franklin Math and Literacy Star 360 data.
Okay, well, welcome back to Franklin. We were so glad to have you here again this week. I will say I seriously thought about having those kindergarten students and 4th graders come back again tonight. Not that Heather and Bree aren't cute, but those kids were really cute. So I think we'll be They're feeling great. Come on. I was going to say how many years they've been been here and say how great things about that. They were, oh, don't see how many years we've been here, so I thought I'd talk about the kindergarten kids. But anyway, so we hope you enjoyed last week's presentation. We hope tonight's will be just as informative. And I do want to introduce Heather and Bree. Heather was already here at a board meeting for a math menu presentation, and Heather is our math coach. And Bree Trainer is here as our literacy coach tonight. That is a little bit different here in Franklin though, because they are here tonight as coaches, but the majority of their day here in Franklin is direct services to kids. So the data that they're going to be presenting tonight is really near and dear to them because that's what they are doing most of the day here in Franklin. So tonight we are going to be sharing, I'm just going to get that clicker. So it's going to be a quick review of district goals and the Star 360 screener. A lot of you have already heard presentations from the other schools, from COSHA, but I know sometimes we have people on TV and visitors who haven't heard the spiel about those things before, so they'll do a quick review of that. And then we'll be on to, again, a quick review of the fall STAR data. And then they're going to talk a little bit about how here in Franklin we make decisions regarding who gets interventions and what types of supports they might get and the various levels of support. And then they're going to go into our mid-year STAR data, how that compares to the fall, our baseline data. And then they are going to talk about our reading and math proficiency and what that looks like in comparison to the district goal. And then they're going to give a sample of how we actually look at our 360 data. That's just one assessment that we do. We do a lot of different assessments, but this is the one they're talking about tonight because this is the one that we're using to measure progress toward the district goal. But they're going to show an analysis of what we look at for that. But we do the same type of thing for every assessment that we do. And they're going to look at growth with that analysis and how with the teachers we looked at both the math and reading data and what some of the findings were, some of the things that we thought were noteworthy about that data. They're going to talk about challenges for instruction and intervention, and then they're going to talk about what is working and what our next steps are going to be. So I'm going to turn it over to Heather and Bree and thank them for being here tonight because Thursday night we also have family game night going on Thursday night. So big week. They still haven't done my training for what I'm teaching on Thursday night. That's tomorrow.
There's a little bit of a delay, so don't panic.
Oh, you mean I should go like this?
Exactly. There's a little bit of a
They
delay.
know me too well. On that SEL web survey that the kids had to do, there were ones specifically to measure if you would have patience with a computer glitch. And I was like, okay, this would be me. But anyway.
I'm just gonna ask if we could hold
Oh.
questions to the end of the presentation, that'd be great, please. Thank you.
Well, there is a delay.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Just right. So like Joyce said, we're going to review our district goal and what our results were for our Star 360 screener. So the MVSD district goal for academic achievement is by this spring, increasing the reading proficiency from 41% to 50% and the math proficiency from 52% to 60% on the Star 360. And the Star 360 is a computer adaptive assessment that we use as a screening tool to just kind of screen kids, and then we do further diagnostics. But both the math and reading assessments have multiple choice questions and take about 30 minutes each. So from the fall, COSHA shared the data with you. So for math in Franklin, we had 95 students that we tested. We had 49 out of 95, which was 51% that were proficient. We had 12 out of 95, or 13%, that were nearly or close to being proficient. And we had 34 out of 95, which is 36%, that were below. So they were categorized in STAR as needing intervention or needing urgent intervention.
And those same students, the same 95 students, were assessed with a reading. We had 37 out of 95, or 39% at or above. Nearly, or on watch, we had 9%, or 9 out of 95. And those in need of intervention or urgent intervention, we had 49 out of 95, 52%.
So once we got our screener, we used several other things to make some decisions about who might need intervention and what supports they might need. So for math, we had additional local assessments other than the STAR 360. We use an addition and multiplication inventory, which goes over addition and multiplication facts. For kindergarten, there is no Star 360 for kindergarten for math. So we have a district-wide math screener that we give 3 times a year. The new math program that we're piloting, there are some pre-unit practice problems that we use, as well as cool downs or exit tickets. I've spoken about math menu before, the window panes that teachers give some ideas on who might need some support, and then teacher input and observations.
A hard time not clicking more than once.
Similarly, with literacy,
I don't know why it's not coming up.
we also have local
There,
assessments.
I got it.
Starting with the Star 360, we also have a developmental spelling assessment that's given first through 6th grade, a high frequency word assessment, kindergarten through 2nd, a letter identification assessment, and the on-demand writing. We have a baseline and then to start the year, so we use that. We also have diagnostic assessments, the Fontes and Pinnell, or the F&P, text level assessment. We have a phonemic awareness screener that's used K1, 2, and a phonological awareness test, or the PAT, that's used in 1st and 2nd mostly. And teacher input and observations are always taken into account.
So once we figure out who needs what kind of support, we have 3 tiers of support for kids. Tier 1 is basically first instruction. It's what every student gets. It's teaching the curriculum to all kids. And we have several things that we do to help support good first instruction. We have consultants that are working with teachers in different content areas. We have paraeducator training. We have professional learning communities where teachers get together and really look at data. And then all the classrooms this year are piloting the new math program.
We also have the Tier 2 instruction, which is a reteaching of grade level standards, or like a double dose. And some of the resources that we use are the level literacy intervention. We also take into account flexible groupings, some reading recovery strategies, the Haggerty curriculum for phonological awareness, and the Orton-Gillingham.
Tier 3 is more specific targeted instruction for students who need support in prior grade level standards or prior unit standards. So if they're a 4th grader and they're in Unit 5, there may be some kids that still need to work on stuff from Unit 1 or 2. So those kids would be in Tier 3, and we have some of the things that we use to support that with the SIPs, Ready, Set, Math, which is a part of math recovery, Wilson, Orton, and then at this stage there may also be referrals to our EST or referrals to special education. So looking at our fall on the left, I went over that at the beginning, and then when we gave our Star 360 again in the winter, the same 95 students, we had a proficiency of 65% that were at or above, so 62 out of 95. Nearly or on watch was 11 out of 95 or 12%, and then below was 22 out of 95 or 23%. So from the fall we were at 51%, the winter we're at 65%, and the district goal was 60%.
And the reading is listed as well, but in the winter we tested those same 95 students, and we had 53% or 50 out of 95 that were at or above. I have a terrible glare on this side. I'm trying to see, but I can't see. I'm so sorry. 50 out of 95, 53% were at or above. Nearly or on watch, we had 10%, 10 out of 95. And those that were in need of intervention or urgent intervention, we had 35 out of 95, which is 37%. So in the fall, our proficiency was 39. In the winter, we're at 53, and the district goal is 50%.
So sample analysis of what we do, we don't always look at just the percentages. We really kind of dig deep for what students need. So
I am trying to get up there. I don't have a pad. Can you use this instead?
Are you trying to click on that?
yes,
Yeah,
because
sure,
it's
click on
a
that
link.
link. told you I'd mess this up.
There we go.
There we go.
So, in addition to STAR, let me just, how that work now.
Apparently, I think I can. I told them they had to be at 15 minutes, so I have to deduct any time I'm detracting from
You
this.
scroll back down a little.
I'm keeping track, guys. You want it up or
A
down?
little bit more.
More up?
Yep. There you go. So what we do when we're in PLCs and working with teachers is we set up a table similar to this. Where in the fall, we list the students that were at or above, on watch, needing intervention or urgent intervention. So I just plugged in student A, L, R, etc. So we place where they are, and then we make some overall notes in terms of what did the teacher observe, what are some things that kids might be struggling on, what were some strengths, and then what are some steps we're going to take for reading and math. Then right next to it, in the spring, or in the winter, we did the same thing. Keep going.
Want me to go down?
Oh, up.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know if I can or not. So then we take the same thing and we list where the kids are at. So if you look at student T, was at urgent intervention, they are now at intervention, so they've moved up for proficiency. Student A is still at or above, so we look at which kids moved, which kids stayed the same. Now the color coding is the key on the left. So one of the reports that we can look at with STAR is something called a student growth percentile. So what it does is it takes the students, what their testing was in the fall, and compares it with other students nationwide who scored similar to them. And then compares how they do the second time they tested. So an SGP of 70 means that that student grew more than 70% of the other kids that scored similar to them. So we've kind of color-coded it, so if someone has low growth, that means they grew less than 34% of their peers, as their peers. So we will then color code. So typical growth would be green and high growth would be purple. So if you look at student G, they were at intervention. They're still at intervention, but they had typical growth, which would lead us to believe that what we're doing is working, like they're growing typically. If you look at student D, they went from on watch to at or above with high growth. So what we're doing with them is working. If you look at student B, they were on watch. They're still on watch, but they have low growth. So we would really kind of look at what are we doing with them for services and what do we need to change. So this is where we can really start to look at, yeah, we can see their proficiency level, but we really want to see how are they growing. Are they having a typical, low, or high growth? And then the notes down below, notes from the teacher, things in math. One of the quotes or the statements she had was, there was a student that needs practice showing his work. He's really good with mental strategies, but loses track when he's documenting his work. So those are things that we take into account when we're figuring out what support students might need.
Okay.
She's not going to know how to get out of here.
I got it. I'm going to click on that.
There you go. So after looking at all of that analysis and how students grew, we found in math, 55 out of 95 students, or 58%, had typical or high growth, meaning we were able to highlight them in green or purple.
And the reading growth was 75 out of 95, or 79% of those same students had typical or high growth.
So some of the math findings I already mentioned, we went from 51 to 65% proficient. That was an increase of 14%, or 13 students are now more proficient than they were before. 58% of the students, or 55 out of 95, showed typical or high growth. 25 out of 46 students, or 54% of the students who were not meeting proficiency in the fall, increased a proficiency level. So they might not be proficient now, but they might have gone from urgent to intervention, etc. So we had that many students increase the level. The percentage of students who were not proficient and not making high growth or typical growth, so the yellow and they're not proficient, we had 21 students out of 95, or 22%. And out of 46 students who received math services, 25 or 54% of them made typical or high growth. And last, the percentage of students scoring in the below category was reduced from 36% to 23%. So the kids we had in intervention or urgent, that was 36%, and now it's 23%, so we moved 12 kids.
Some of the things that we found in reading were the percentage of students who were proficient went from 39 to 53, as I mentioned before, with an increase of 14%, 13 students. 79% of the students in grades 1 through 6 showed typical or high growth, so that's the pink or the green. 28 out of 58, or 48% of the students not meeting proficiency in the fall increased at least one proficiency level in the winter. The percentage of all students who are not proficient and not making typical or high growth is 13 out of 95, or 14%. Out of the 49 students receiving literacy services, 37 students made typical or high growth, which is 76%. And the percentage of students scoring in the below category was reduced from 52% to 37%, 14 students.
Some of the challenges we find with instruction and intervention are student and staff illnesses. It may not be related to COVID. There are a lot of other sicknesses going around, which is keeping kids and staff out of school. We continue to work with students on their executive functioning skills, which is their organization, working memory, and perseverance. And then also meeting the needs of students who require support in multiple areas. Trying not to take them out of the first instruction, where the curriculum is taught, but finding other times of the day that we can work with students when there are multiple people who want to work with them as well.
What's working for intervention? So teachers have weekly consult meetings with the interventionists, the special educators, the school psychologists, and the guidance counselor.
We use diagnostic assessments to determine what students need and modify their services, their grouping size, the dosage, how frequency. We're constantly tweaking what we might need to do with students.
We have a student support services document that has all of the supports that are in place for students, so we can quickly access to see if we need more time for a student, when we need to make our adjustments for our group sizes or dosage. We can see who's available and how we can change services.
This year, we're using illustrative mathematics, the pre-unit assessments, the high leverage assessments from All Learners Network, and intervention priorities to help target what they need for math support.
And we've added a couple of extra slots for intervention times for certain grades that didn't have them. It's just allowing us to get, again, that more access to students when we both need access, or there are other people that need access to students as well.
And communication with families as services and things change. We're communicating with families on what we're doing to support kids.
Next steps. We'll continue all of those things that are working thus far on the slide previous. And we're going to review this. We're reviewing the students who had low growth and did not meet proficiency in math and or reading to determine why and plan some next steps for them.
We're continuing our work with Christian Quartermanch in math on strategies to help students who are struggling to learn their facts, their fact fluency.
As well as monitoring attendance closely.
And we're currently participating in professional development with Sarah Ward, who is helping us with strategies to work with kids on their executive function skills. And we'll take questions.
Just when I was getting that clicking down.
I know. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you, guys.
Joanne was first. You had a question?
So, I think we just had parent-teacher conferences
Yep.
roll through. Are these scores, or is 360 shared with the families and during parent-teacher conference?
Since we use it as a screener to just kind of see where kids are at, we get some information from it, but it's not really detailed in what questions students got wrong, because they all get different questions. So we really use our diagnostics, and that's what's more shared with parents. Our results from the fact fluency assessments, the Fontes and Pinnell, those are what's shared with students with parents, because we're able to gather more information from those.
Yeah.
This is just a screener to kind of see where everyone's at, and then we dig deeper when we need to.
And classroom assessments, end of units, those are shared at conferences as well.
I'd like to go back to the math findings, but I'm not sure our technology director can.
You just have to challenge me, don't you? Let me
Challenging you.
Let me see. if
I think I
can-
can remember my question.
I can
though.
get back there for you.
Oh, I think we can,
So let me ask the question, which I think is there. You talk about the students taking assessment, in, say, the fall and the winter. The questions get harder because you're now 3 or 4 months later?
so they give the questions and score them based on where a typical third grader should be at a certain type of year. So the questions are kind of scaffolded, and if they get a bunch correct, they'll keep getting harder questions. If they get one wrong, it drops them down. But their overall score is based on where they should be at that time of year. So it's not necessarily based on what they should have done at the beginning of the year. So the scale keeps moving as the year progresses.
So the challenges get harder. So, so a student who needs to progress from one level to the other has 2 challenges, not only to take and challenge, increase their skills, but also to increase their comparative
Because the
number.
bar is moving as.
And I ask that because some of your numbers are pretty amazing on your growth. And I'm thinking, wow, and they changed that. It's very good. Thank you, Heather.
My challenge one more time.
I stopped because Dawn told me not to. Where do you want to go to?
Can we get to the slide that has the fall versus winter, like summary scores for
Yes,
either of the two?
But the way we had all this fade in, I have to
Yeah.
click a lot, but I enjoyed it.
Okay. Okay.
This one?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Oh, stop laughing at me over there.
Do you want math or reading?
it doesn't matter, I actually wanna see the green, the blue, and the pink, because
Oh, you
I,
wanted to see the growth one?
no,
Oh, you do
see the
want
bars
to-
there that have at or above 50th
Yes,
percentile.
Yeah.
So, after we heard from Swanton, I was talking with, well, I asked Julie, and I was talking to someone who had watched online. And, you know, we always come back to how can we only be, 40% proficient, right? And there was a comment made in the Swanton presentation about proficient being above 50th percentile. So I went back and talked to somebody who had watched the presentation and said, what do you think proficient means? And they said, well, there's a skill the kid's supposed to be able to do, and if they can do the skill, they're proficient, and if they can't, they're not. But that's not what this is saying. It's measuring not can you do a thing or not do a thing. It's measuring can you do a thing better than half the other kids your age.
Yes.
Right? And that's really different.
Mhm.
So, you know, we look at, well, maybe we should go to reading for a second. Sorry. So reading, 39% in the fall, right? We'd say, look at that and go, only 39% of our kids can read at grade level? Well, no, that's not what it says. It says 39% are above the median, or in that top 50%, right? So we don't have a 61% gap to fill to get to 100%, right? That'd be wonderful. Well, to be average, you know, to meet our state average or the benchmark average, we're shy by 11%. So those 3 blocks are really informative. Now that I love that you showed it this way. This is I was hoping to see it at some point, but
We're making a template.
so to show 50th percentile, right, who's at or above 50%? Well, in winter, 53% of our students are above that. So we have a larger block of kids in the top half than the benchmark average. That middle group, that 10%, we're spot on, right? We should have 10% in there. And that bottom group, 40%, 40th percentile, so the lowest 40%, fewer of our kids, less than 40%, are in that block. So that's really different than the way I was thinking about it, and I think a lot of us were thinking, and following up with the public is different than the way they were thinking about it. And so, you know, I know some of our scores are going to be good and some of them are going to be bad from time to time and in different settings and different grades, and that's fine, but I think it's really important we all are looking at this on like the right scale and understanding this stuff as we make decisions about it. So that was really what I wanted to talk about. To get to 65% of the kids above a 50th percentile benchmark really, truly is amazing. So thank you all for your work on that. That's a pretty incredible feat.
I do think the other thing though that's really important is this is one assessment, and it really is looking at, you should always look at your data in the context of, there's so many other things, as they were just talking about, that this is the screener, and then we dig deeper, and so and this is what we do with all of our data, is look at it and look at strengths, weaknesses, next steps, and do you want me to go to another slide?
No,
So I
I'm
really
good.
got
That
this
was
down.
all. That was all I had.
She's got it down now.
Well, thank you, Devin, because I was, when I see these, I was like, oh my gosh, wow, you know, and I'm thinking when I see my kids' report cards, proficient, almost proficient, that's how I was thinking of it in my head.
We use the word a lot, and it means different things.
Different,
right?
in
depending on,
context, right?
exactly,
So the clarification,
exactly.
yeah. Anybody else? Peter?
So you talked about students that are at different levels, right, in the same grade. Some of them are at, you know, proficient at a high level, and others are still maybe a grade below. They still need to learn those, but they're all in the same class, getting the same instruction. How, I'm just picturing it being frustrated if you're behind. How do we compensate? I know we take them out and put them, but when they're actually in the classroom getting instruction, how does that go, I guess?
Well, it's hard. For math, there's only so many different ways you can tweak the first instruction for math. I think when kids are working, they might have different supports in classroom assignments that we try and modify from there. The one thing I've tried to do sometimes is if I know what lessons are coming up, sometimes I'll front load, it's called front loading, prep the kids with what's going to be coming next, so when they see it in class, they've kind of seen it before, so it's easier for them to kind of follow along. That's still constantly a struggle. And we have a new math program that is helping us with some resources, but this was our first year using it, so we're really trying to dig in to see what it has for supports. You know, reading, you have different reading books.
We do, and we have, I mean, teachers are, again, constantly looking at data and deciding what kids need. During the literacy block, there might be a group that's working on comprehension of the text and maybe a written piece, and there might be another group that's working with the teacher, or there might be, you know, everyone gets their first instruction, but then once that's been delivered, then it's differentiated after that, depending on the needs. And every class, I can't really speak to each, every classroom operates a little bit differently, depending on the kids that are in it. And I don't know if that's kind of...
I guess my question overall is, and don't expect you to really answer it, but is it the best way to do it? Is there a better way to get, so we have more similar people in similar points in their progress in reading or math, that it would be easier to teach than to have such a gap between learnings?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
know
know.
the
I don't
answer to
either.
that.
I'm just-
It's hard,
really-
we're constantly trying to perfect our craft and get better at it and supporting all kids. But every year you get a new group of kids, and what works for one group might not work for another group, so we're constantly meeting together, the weekly meetings with teachers, is crucial. And the communication with teachers is crucial to help support the best we can.
And we meet as well, like, what did you see? How can we make that kind of
I
more
might need
smooth?
this one 3 days a week, can you see them twice?
Oh,
And then
yeah.
we'll swap, like, all right, they're doing much better in this, I need them an extra day. And we're constantly tweaking that.
And we want all the kids exposed to that first instruction. And it's not like the teacher's talking 90 minutes and, for 85 minutes, it's going over, half the kid's head. It really, it's that first instruction, and then they really are differentiating after that first instruction, but we want everybody exposed to that grade level first instruction. And they're constantly working on the foundation, if they're missing foundational skills, but it is a challenge. Nobody's gonna say it's not a challenge, because you wanna make sure that you are continuing to, the kids that, get it like that, and that you're challenging them, and kids that are lacking some of those foundational skills, and making sure you're helping the kids that are struggling with it. So nobody's gonna say it's easy, for sure.
I have an unfair question, maybe you want to move the agenda along.
It goes to Joyce.
People my age, and I do talk with a few people about education, there's a thinking that with all the technology now that they call them kids, I call them students, don't have the basic skills. They don't have to have the basic skills because they have so much technology. And an example we always use is the multiplication tables and also reading vocabulary and stuff. Is that true, or is it, us old folks just kind of fantasizing?
Well, I guess I must be in the old
Old
folks
folks.
range too, because we still do fact fluency. We have our inventories that look at their addition and multiplication facts.
Yeah, the research is really clear that those skills and fluency with those skills are prerequisite to go on to more complex comprehension and
I feel better
higher
already.
level math.
You feel younger?
I feel older now.
Well, there is a lot of
No,
pre-teaching.
when I look at Heather, I feel old. And she's one of our students, and see how bright she is now?
22.
Yeah, she's
Oh,
only
thank you,
22.
thank you.
Barely.
I hired her when she was 12.
No other questions? Thank you very much for your presentation. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Joyce.
Just gonna stop.
Stop the share.
Good job.
Nice job.
Okay, next on the agenda is the update on board seat vacancy for Highgate. In the shared drive, Julie put the two people that had letters of interest. Tracy, who we spoke to us for a few minutes today, and then Kelly, who is unable to be here tonight because she's got MVSD step-up day. So I was wondering if anybody had any questions or would like to do any kind of
Is
discussion.
there a closing date on that?
So that's what I asked Julie too, there is no closing date till we make a decision.
Right, it's open until you fill it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if somebody decided tomorrow they wanted to,
Absolutely.
okay, that's all I need to know.
I would expect that we will put on the agenda a process, since, we're lucky enough to have two interested applicants. The board typically would interview those applicants and then make a decision.
There was a third person that was, spoke of interest, and I sent her, the description of the board position is, and I have not heard back from her. But it was nice to see having more than one person, and,
It's great.
it's really great. I was kind of walking on clouds a little bit, not gonna lie. And I was like, well, why can't we just take them all? Everybody get a chance to look at them? Do you want, we'll put it on the next agenda to get a little more time, Dawn? See if we get somebody else.
I was focused here, I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said, did anybody have any questions? And did everybody get a chance to review both of them? And
I did, but I went to my email, I didn't have anything, but then I remembered maybe it was in the shared drive, so I did review them both, but it looked like it got emailed too, so I don't know if I just didn't get the email or what, but anyway.
We
But,
put them in the board drive.
yeah, that's where I got it.
Right, but if you need me to send you anything, you know.
No, that's
you can always
okay,
let me know.
I found it eventually. For some reason I couldn't get it, I went into the shared drive, and,
Right.
okay, it's good. Always nice to have a little competition.
So put on for the next agenda to invite both of them to interview.
So will that be done like during meeting or executive session or are we gonna deliberate in it? Do we have an idea about how it's gonna?
I think it's probably public session to interview. I don't know if, I will look into whether the board would be, I don't know that it's appropriate for executive session. I will look into that for the board to
Would
make
we-
sure.
Would we make the?
I don't think it counts as deliberative session, but it might, so I will look into that.
Is it
Usually
something we
interviews would be an open meeting, but
have like an open meeting to interview them, and then would we do like executive session amongst the board to decide
Which candidate?
which candidate?
So I will look into whether that counts as a deliberative session.
And then next on the agenda is the MVSD Board Committee discussion and action. So discussion of committees and purpose. And then in the drive was put the committees that were suggested.
I can share
That'd be
the screen.
great. And although Megan's not here tonight, she did send me an email of the ones that she would be interested in being on for board.
So I took all the input people had, and Rennick had written up some things as well from the conversations he had with folks, but I think it's representative.
we should be in there for that.
Do you want me to go through them? You want to go through them?
Well, both of us can. I know like so we're fortunate to already have the facilities committee. And then, John, did you want my printed copy?
Just pass it down if you would. I was working all day, I rushed home and grabbed a sandwich and then behind the tractor at MVU that I followed halfway to.
They're both on, there's two
Okay.
pieces.
So, thank you.
Yep, page one and
Just
page
I'm
two.
sorry,
Second one.
So,
And then last week, we talked about the finance committee,
Yep.
Committees on
made that decision.
so that's Devin, Rennick, Joanne, and Laura. So then it was a suggestion for the executive committee, which would be me, Rennick, and Peter and Julie, doing the scheduled agendas, board development planning, and superintendent evaluation. And please feel free to jump in if anybody has any suggestions or comments.
We also had talked about adding, instead of having a separate policy committee, we could make the executive committee the policy committee, potentially, and invite people.
What's the purpose behind an executive committee? You've had school boards in this district for these 50 to 100 years. What is it? I guess I want to know what the purpose is. I saw that somewhere, purpose. And how is it going to function? Is it going to collect data and make recommendations? Or is it going to have power to make actions, take action?
No, I would say no on the power to make, or to take action, because has to be brought in front of the school board. Can't have a committee do that. It has to be everybody in agreement. So no action.
I think part of the intent behind it was, because we don't have necessarily a board goals committee, and one of the things that came out of board goals committee last year, working with Terry, was being able to share some of those things, and then I think allow for more focus on what would be like a student success committee. So in terms of like planning for the retreat, maybe coming up with a board development plan, which we've been talking about for some time. And then under that same thing, sort of as discussed last year, which was going over superintendent evaluations. So that could be more a collaborative thing. So that was some of the intent behind potentially doing that.
So it's not going to, it's going to be a recommendation committee, right, like the other committees? Okay. Then I'm going to make a suggestion, that we have the 3 officers, and let me tell you, I'm saying this based on an experience I had a number of years ago with an executive committee, not my district, but a consulting district. They started out with 3 people because they had a 5-member board. No, I'm sorry, they didn't have a bigger board than that, 7 members, because they stayed there because they didn't want to get a majority in the executive committee. Well, we have a 9-member board. I would suggest that we have a 4-member executive committee. That way, if it comes to the board as a recommendation, it's not going to be 2-1. You get away from a 2-1 if that happens. And I'm going to suggest something that you're going to hear a lot from me about, because I live in Swanton, and Swanton people talk to me. I think it would be really great if a Swanton member was the 4th member on the executive committee. So I know we're geographically all want to work together and hold hands and sing Kumbaya, but I think we're starting to create more and more of a problem in Swanton. In fact, one of the things I heard, how come on an executive committee and leadership, how come one town has 2 people? And I'm not against that. That's the way we voted, and that's fine. But there is perception and reality. So if we're going to do an executive committee, I would like to see 4 members. And if something came to the board, it's 4-0, 3-1, 2-2, but you don't have an opportunity for a 2-1 discussion. So something to consider. And I don't, is Megan here tonight?
She's not, she's at the MVU.
Okay.
Step up.
I mean, I would gladly volunteer to do it, but if Toby or Megan feel strongly, then it's the idea. But I don't think 4 is a bad number.
Jen, did Megan express interest in that? Probably not, because I'm guessing she was.
I'm finding her, Megan. Megan said, no, she did not express interest in that.
But she's not here for this discussion.
Correct. So
Yeah, I'm okay deferring to Megan or Dawn on that. I have no vested interest. I think I'm slowly sunsetting, so.
Is that quiet?
Well, this is my last year, for this term anyway. I don't know, I don't know if, that's a year away, but I see my role, because believe it or not, I don't consider myself age-wise old, but I've been on this board and the previous boards for several, I think I have over 10 years. So I just see my role as more of a supportive role, and I don't really, I think it's anyone else. The executive committee doesn't interest me.
is that something we can table until Megan is present?
Well, I would actually argue against trying to make the committees officially 4. I think by that logic, then we would try to make every committee 4-member to sort of avoid like a 2-1.
That wouldn't be a bad idea either if people would volunteer to do it.
I mean, ideally it would be great, but I think we have to consider with currently 8 members, potentially a 9th. Like, I think one of the things that we're all going to try to avoid is stretching everyone too thin. So I think concerning any committee, I think you should keep it to 3, and then just like last year, nobody is precluded from participating and chiming in on any of these committees at any time, just to keep it simple. And then in terms of the interest in the towns, I mean, my thing is, I think that we spend a lot of time talking about the towns, and that's great, but I mean, we are trying to move towards one district. I technically live in Swanton, even though I'm registered in Highgate, so, you know, I just, if that's a committee that the board doesn't want to have, or feels that it's not necessary, then it's not necessary, and some of those responsibilities can be shared amongst the other ones that we do have to not stretch it too thin, so, just something to think about.
The one thing that really concerned me, not so much the executive committee, but the superintendent evaluation. Before we elected officers, there were discussions occasionally in meetings about our evaluation. I had a side conversation with at least one person, but I think evaluation is a really big issue in schools now, accountability. And we have here the superintendent evaluation. And I thought when we were talking about that, I was going to say weeks ago, but it might have been months ago, we really wanted to look at personnel evaluations. And now I see superintendent evaluation of the other executive committee. It looks like we've narrowed the scope. And I don't know if that was intent, Rhino, or...
Well, so one of the things that was put out a couple weeks ago was that the intent of the committees and anybody's ideas or plans for them to be shared, and then that's how this was shaped. So originally it was bounced around having evaluations as its own committee itself, which is still an idea that we can talk about, or having it underneath another one, and then having those other evaluations a part of it, which I actually think is a good idea. And that was something that actually came out on the original email that Devin had put out right before town hall. So yeah, I think that's part of the discussion, to figure out where we put that and what that encompasses, and if that should be its own committee, then I'm up for any idea.
Well, I think as its own committee, it would probably be a short-term thing.
Right.
I think you would have a short-term committee, ad hoc, whatever you want to call it, that might meet for a few weeks, a few months, and do that. But once the committee's in place, then the evaluation committee would have to decide if they wanted to take and do that, if the board members want to do that, or did they want to give it back to some other committee, executive, whatever. So I think there are two parts to it. I'm not really advocating right now for another standing committee called evaluation. So.
Well, the board only evaluates the superintendent, so that's why I think that's listed there. Maybe the executive committee plans for the superintendent evaluation and then make calls together a group of interested people to, right, you know, you could discuss how you wanted to do it.
And I think everybody should have a say. I'd like to table this one if nobody has issue with that until Megan's here and for further discussion. Please, on the next one. Is everybody okay with that? Thank you. Policy committee suggested.
Yeah, one of the things we talked about in terms of breaking up the board goals committee into sort of its parts was policy and then student success, or you know, informing a committee of the board about how students are doing through a variety of ways. And the policy committee probably could just meet 3 times a year at this point, because we have a renewal process with some of them. It's not that we're really missing a ton, it's just a matter of reviewing and bringing things forward to recommendation for the full board. I would want administrators as part of that as well. But again, we had some conversations about, well, if you have an executive committee, they could do that, or do you want a separate committee for policy? I mean, policy is front and center piece of board's work. And then the student success committee, really looking at our continuous improvement, the local assessment, just different types of data that we can bring throughout the year. Maybe quarterly, I would recommend, where we could do some more in depth. If it were a constant committee, which we will do if that's the will of the board. My only concern is that I'm directing administrators to create reports and presentations on a and it's a lot of work to prepare. I mean, the presentation you saw today took many, many hours. So I just am cognizant of that, but if that is, I'd love to have like a quarterly schedule or something where we can do some in-depth information to the board.
So I know for the policy committee, I have one person who's interested. And do I have Joanne?
No.
No?
She has said she doesn't want to do policy.
Oh, wait a minute, my bad.
She's doing this.
I'm looking up, look at Joanne go. Joanne said, and
Joanne
then,
said no.
okay, so I have, it's gonna take me.
I'm the only person who wants to do policy.
Oh, okay, you're the,
So I can
Julie.
do a policy committee. I'm just envisioning it though more of, and anyone can chime in, but, if we're having some issue, typically, one of the first questions I feel the board should be asking is, do we have a policy?
Right.
And then the second thing is, if we don't, do we want the policy? So I think that would be, at that time, I think the committee would kick in and say, okay, let's have an in-depth committee discussion on that. What would a policy look like? Or, and then come back to the board with, okay, we had this issue, we didn't have a policy, there was some consensus that we might need one, can the policy committee look at it? And then, so the policy committee does that, would probably be me if I'm on there, Julie, if she wants principals there too, if it involves them, probably. And then we hash it out, try to say, what do we want, what do we need, and then we come back to the board with it and say, this is what we came up with, do we want it or not? And the other thing I would think is making sure that we're reviewing all the policies on the schedule that we have to. And that's kind of limited in scope. So what I'm getting at is I don't envision it in not envisioning it being something that meets that often.
Right, I'm thinking beginning, middle, end of year.
Right.
Or if an issue comes
Yeah.
up, as I was
Yeah.
talking with Jen a bit today, I want to have a group of people, so if an issue arises,
Yeah.
where we think, boy, we need this policy,
Yeah.
I have a group to call upon
Yeah.
and say, can we meet, when are you available in the next few weeks, that kind of thing.
I just think, I think that's great, and we all need to be, all board members need to be asking when we're when there's something that's affecting us, like what do we do? Those are the two questions. Do we have a policy? And then do we want a policy? We shouldn't always run a policy because it's not always good. But that's the essential questions for us. I think when we're experiencing something that's a challenge for us as a board. So I will be on that board. I don't know why I went into that dissertation, but I did. If we're looking, if we want to seal that up, I'm on it, and whoever else wants to be.
Joanne, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think it's a question. So are we making commitments to these committees? Like, is this, policies is not really my thing, but I mean, I think there are sometimes certain policies that might interest or pique, a board member's interest, and they would be like, you know what, I would like to listen in, I may want to comment on this particular policy that's being brought up. So, I mean, and I know, like Rennick just said, like the committees are always open, but I just don't wanna leave Toby like by himself being on this committee, so I don't know if anybody else wants to like join it and be, okay, sorry, I'm trying.
I'm okay.
I'm trying, I'm a keyboard.
And also, you can add people to the committees, so when we choose the next Highgate representative, maybe they'll wanna jump onto a committee as
I
well.
will give a choice, facilities or policy.
I'll take policy. Just saying.
I wrote your name in the grid, so it's
In the grid.
sealed.
Can't back out now.
All right.
On the table. So for student success,
Real quickly going,
yeah,
cause I missed it, for finance committee.
we've got Devin, Rennick, you
It-
signed up?
I did,
Okay,
I did.
I'm just reminding you, it's in the chart.
Well, my question was, and it was to Laurel, was that a reasonable proposal, was to sort of have that committee do budget development and budget communications, sort of more ongoing throughout the year?
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah, I welcome that very much, and Joanna and I even talked today, I don't know if you wanna say, but I thought it was a great idea, even coming in to just kind of do like a financial update, like every couple of months or once a month, just to kind of, I mean, I present financial reports and the warrants, but just to kind of talk about what's going on, you know, and see what you think is more relevant for the community to know versus what maybe I'm thinking about, or just to touch base. There's a lot that happens, whether it's increased special ed costs or contract costs or facility things and or tax rates or next year or equalized pupils, like all that stuff. You know, I love to talk about it. But it might be beneficial too to kind of get a better sense. So as much of that as you want in the finance committee, I welcome for sure.
And that can just kind of be like, you know, if something comes up, we can just convene if the other board members are good with that, and just sort of like set meetings like as they're needed or as they occur.
I wouldn't mind something regular, because I wouldn't want it to be like, oh, this has come up, like, oh, we should have a meeting in the next 2 weeks, where I think if we meet every other month, might get on a, you know, a flow of, these are the things that Laura will update us on into more gritty detail. You know, how's the budget looking for, you know, the end of the year, or these are the big projects, these are the, you know, large vouchers you're gonna be seeing coming up. I don't know, I would be more for regular every other month, or I don't know what
Yeah, I don't think
timeframe.
that would hurt if you're looking to, for what we discussed, where, you know, when we do get to budget development time, you're feeling like you have a better understanding
Right,
of pressures,
because we-
or, you know, what's happening with long-term planning over the next 3 years for revenue losses or different kinds of situations. It's tough to get into that in a board meeting, whereas if we could dig into it, I think that would lend itself into a better budget development discussion, or.
So could it be like almost like increasing, sort of, because obviously right after the town hall, you know, maybe there's less of a need, and then as we get into like April, May, and June, or is it?
It depends on how you look at it. I mean, right now, my brain immediately shifts, and Joanna and I talked about that today, like utilization of carryover funds. How do we want to position ourselves for revenue next year? Like, so I'm already immediately, when the budget passes, I shift gears into the remainder of this year and then the next couple of years coming. So it really depends on whatever conversations you want to have, but I think, judging by the conversation that we had, if you want to be able to have that understanding before budget development, then you need to see it all the way through a little deep, you know, be exposed to a little bit more all the way through. Whatever, it's really up to you. I'm happy to do. I don't think it would not be beneficial.
What do you think, though?
This all sounds great. Putting me on the spot for a schedule.
Well, no, just in terms of like the frequency, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I'd just be pulling I'd be guessing. So I think we need to be open to revising, I guess is what I'd say. It's like, I don't know, if we want to start with every other month as a baseline for an in-person thing, and figure out if it's enough time. I don't know.
Let's start with one.
Yeah, we've never done this before, so.
Yeah, let's have one.
Yeah, and I mean, I would just ask that maybe one of you, or maybe all of you, like, can shoot me some ideas. I don't wanna head in the wrong direction, so if I'm preparing the materials, or if you're preparing like a little mini agenda, I wanna make sure it becomes what you want it to be, and I have a way of taking over, so.
Yeah.
So one of the things I will say is, and this kind of goes to what Julie was saying earlier, I don't think every time any committee meets necessarily that admin has to prepare all these things. I think just sometimes an update and a conversation about what is actually happening, right? As opposed to, we need this long presentation prepared, but it could just be like, here's the bullet points of what we're doing, even if it's like student outcome, and we're like, proficiency or assessments. We don't need like 10 pages like PowerPoint. It could just be, what are the issues that you're dealing with, what's happening, like, let's have a conversation so we have a more in-depth understanding of it, and then we can carry on. And I think that could also cut down on a lot of the preparation admin has to do, as opposed to feeling like it has to be this long thing, because I hate making PowerPoints. It like makes me want to like. So I'm just to like an idea to throw out that, again, honestly, I'm good with just some bullet points, and then, hey, can we just discuss these areas, and you let us know what you're working on. You obviously have the material there that you can draw in, without having to have it like, verbatim, this and that, if that kind of makes sense.
Well, you know we like to play.
So. We also love to talk, Julie. So.
Fair enough. No. Yeah.
But it's true, same with these presentations, they're great, but a lot of times, some of the most beneficial input comes in that discussion afterwards.
Yeah, like, just for example, I mean, I met with Laura, and very quickly an hour went by of just talking about, 16 pages of, checks, because it just led to other discussions and just questions. So sometimes you just need just a conversation, so I agree with that.
And I'm great with that too. My only point is if we head in the wrong direction.
Right, we'll get sidetracked.
Yeah, move us back, like I would want the committee to be what you want it to be, and not if we keep going down a path and we're doing too much talking about the year end and you really want to talk about budget, or too much talking about how we're working with administration and you really want to know the impact of kids, like then, I think I would just ask that if we're having that kind of looser conversation, that you guide it a little bit too, so I want it to be beneficial to the committee, I guess is the point.
Julie, do we, I think this past year we did, but all these committees have to have a warned meeting
We do, yes.
and minutes taken?
We don't take minutes for everything. We do for facility because there's a lot,
Okay.
to keep track of.
All right.
But we do warn them, yes.
I'd seen some of the warnings, particularly on goals coming out, but I never saw any minutes, so I never,
No.
yeah.
Terry sometimes would take notes and give an update to the whole
But a
board, which I
report
think
comes
would be
to-
the purpose, is that you would have committee report outs.
Student Success Committee.
I know that Megan
Yep.
said that she wants to be on that committee.
Yes, I do have her in here.
I would like to be on that committee.
Did you say yes?
Yeah, I said yes.
That's been
You're gonna be a busy girl.
That was one of your priorities from the first meeting.
Right, no, somehow I got on the finance committee.
Because you put your hand up, Julie, and we
No, it's because
appreciate it.
no one else.
Anybody else for that one right now?
I'm torn between that one and policy. I guess I wanna know a little more about what we would do in a student success committee versus what we would bring to the full board like we just saw. Like what would be different in those compared to something like this?
I say sign up for the committee and have that be the discussion.
She's good.
Alright, fine, Julie.
Well, I just,
Because then I think we could decide.
Yeah, I didn't know if people already had those ideas, we got a long list of things on this, and I didn't know if anybody had kind of thought about that yet or not.
Because I think it wouldn't hurt, and no offense to admin or Laura or Julie, if the board members, the first initial meeting, maybe just the board members themselves met, that are like in the committees, to be like, can we have, 20 minutes Zoom to just talk about, you know,
Well,
where we.
they need to be open to the public. We
Okay.
need to have a central, you know, and I would feel uncomfortable with a board committee just meeting to talk about the work that you're giving me and my administration
Well,
to do
not
without
looking at it
me
as
there.
work.
Well, I just,
It is work,
or
but
without,
just
you know,
like
you're
what direct-
directing me in these committees in
Right.
many ways. And so, that would make me uncomfortable.
Any other discussions? What?
I was
I
like,
just
say
made
something.
everyone
I was
so
like-
quiet.
No, but I do understand what Joanne is saying, like, I think that was just more maybe just a chance to figure out, okay, what's the vision for it before we actually start discussing like any directives.
Right, so I think we should have a meeting to do some planning.
Mhm.
And then as we go through, we're either on target or we're not on target. And then we make adjustments from there.
Because it has to be warned.
Absolutely.
So it's-
Even though it's not even though it is not a quorum of the board and you are not making a decision, it is of interest to the public. And therefore, you should be having, it's one thing if you've got a couple people on Zoom doing the prep for the board retreat. That's a work session, that's different. So, you know, the agenda prep is not something that needs to be warned. But when you're talking about, you know, student data, or you're talking about policy, or you're talking about those other things, it needs to be warned. And that's what we do.
Julie, you just mentioned agenda prep. Are we still on the same timeline as we had before if we want agenda items?
I would speak, we haven't talked yet about how, what will be changed about agendas, if anything at all. I mean, I think you would still be reaching out to Jen.
Because I know previous chairs, we usually had to get in something by Thursday.
Right, because I'm finalizing the board agenda by Thursday, so it can go Friday.
Yeah.
So we have to have for the next Tuesday,
yeah.
right?
Okay,
So we're gonna be talking about shift, you know, we did second and fourth, but we've got a board calendar for you. I also hope that when we arrange all these committees, we can put them in a calendar so people can see where everything is. Because we also want to we try to have at least 1 week a month where we don't have night meetings, or we save it, you know, because stuff comes up, like we have other things.
No one else is doing policy, you can put me with Toby and with the time being.
In the policy committee.
Yeah, it's just a couple times a year.
It's not a lifetime commitment.
Since there's no negotiations.
There's no negotiations next year, so that will help. We'll always have the extra ad hoc things that you have to do.
So jumping to the ad hocs, we did talk about, excuse me, the Ag Advisory Board, which Donna.
Well, it's a committee,
Committee,
it's not, it is the Ag Advisory Committee, having the reps to go.
Okay.
It's not a separate committee.
So I read from here to here, sorry, my apologies.
No, it's mine.
So Dawn and Joanne, last meeting volunteered for that.
Fine with it.
Toby, I wrote you down for the Regional Advisory Board.
Okay, yeah, I'm interested in that, definitely.
Perfect.
I will let you know when they're scheduled.
Legislative Committee, Megan would like to be on that.
Do we want to call that a separate committee, or do we want to say it's time, like a couple times a year, does a group want to get together? Like, do you have to say, you know, I'd be interested in hearing from the board when you want to meet, and then we could say, okay, it's January, the session's about to start, who wants to be on, do we want to have a legislative meeting? Who wants to come, because it really would be at the beginning of the session, and, you might meet twice or something during the legislative session, and then look at whether you want to do, I don't know if this committee would want to do resolutions as well.
Peter?
I think Julie makes a good point. I don't think it's a committee that, it may, if there's some legislation that really people are committed to and really affects our district, may meet more often, but to your point, Julie, I think the summertime, when we have our retreat, or if we do that, I think that's a good time to look at something like that. Is there anything, because if you try to do it right before the session, do we have enough time to really think about it? If we look in the summer, what's coming up, what things, and we've already, I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I know we've already mentioned some of them in the past.
Oh, yeah.
We should look at those maybe in our summer retreat and say, where do we want to go with these?
Can I ask Don what his recommendation would be for given how the legislative session works?
I'm gonna change the focus just a little bit. I think one of the key things here is the VSBA resolutions. We should start now, like April, because they go in, I think, I used to chair that committee, I think it's in July they meet. So
You have to submit them by
it in by June or something. So if we have resolutions, we should be working on them, as I say, certainly not later than May, but get those going. So I'm focused on that part of the legislative committee. Maybe that's not appropriately named. As far as the whole legislative thing, what Julie said is true. And let me tell you that the legislation is started formally being planned about a week or two after the election. I mean, we were in Montpelier, end of November, early December, planning the agenda, what items are gonna come up and which ones are gonna get priority. And as a former chair, you were basically said, you can have 3 or 4, 2 would be better, and I usually try to squeeze out at least 3, that are going to make it all the way through. When you think of 150 bills, everybody wants those 150, somebody wants every one of them to pass, and then you look how many pass. So I think the timing would be really good. Is this an election year? No, this is not one, but I think to talk about it maybe in December amongst ourselves, so that in January we wouldn't be discussing it, we would say these are the important to us. And VSBA kind of follows that script too.
Yes. Oh, good. We also have, the VSBA, the VSA, I'm a trustee and officer of VSA. VASBO, we have a legislative collaborative, so you get updates through the year. These things change hourly. Like because I'm an officer, I get updates from the executive director of the Vermont Superintendent's Association, call your legislator, this is in the House, it might make it to crossover, these things, oftentimes we can spend a lot of time thinking. I think about that preschool bill that was like 50 pages long and huge in its scope. We pretty much knew if Let's Grow Kids was against it, it wasn't going anywhere, and guess what? That's kind of what happened. They're going to do a study. But those kinds of things happen pretty rapidly in the session, so it's almost hard to schedule meetings around it. You get updates from the Vermont School Boards Association that are pretty timely, but even then, we can, during the legislative session, we can maybe have I try and put them in my reports, but maybe we have an agenda item on legislative topics or something. I don't know, it'd be interesting to discuss how you want to do it.
I don't think we need a legislative committee. I think that.
But the resolutions are right now,
what
usually this time last year.
We do need resolutions, if we want to do them.
So maybe just call it VA assignments, and then we deal with it in a timely manner, instead of just a legislative committee.
That might be a good executive committee to get their teeth in. Because it's going to be short term. I mean, you're going to do them, send them in, and then you wait for 4 more months.
John, would you, in your opinion, for April, because you said start talking about the VSBA resolutions now.
Right, I think Julie, you know, I did it for years, but, and I believe you have to have them in June.
Yes.
Because a meeting, I remember one vacation in Maine, they called me and said, you gotta Zoom this. No, I'm not Zooming this on vacation. But anyway, and because then what happens is after the resolutions go in, when they have their regional meetings, there's discussion or can be. And then the annual meeting is somewhere between the end of October and the beginning of November. It's flipped a little bit. So, yeah, we really should have them in June. And I think we did last year. We
We
had
did,
someone got them
yeah,
in June.
they have to follow a particular, you know.
Oh, I think we had a desire for resolutions last year. I thought it was great. It's the
I
first,
thought it was
first,
wonderful.
first board I've ever been on that's done one.
I loved it.
But I don't know, I mean, I don't know,
Just leave it at that.
right, well, like,
I mean, if we have something, we'll, as a board,
Yeah.
put it together.
cause I don't know if we have anything right now. I don't,
Well, we talked a little bit about some of the athletic policies, but I don't know if we want to go there.
oh,
I thought you had.
yeah, that was, yeah, that's,
The VPA,
well, that's my own personal issue, which I bring up to my legislators regularly, but, yeah, that's a good point, Don, but I don't know if I wanna navigate, I don't know, that was, it's, yeah, I just, there's a, yeah,
state teacher contract, that's easier.
yeah, yeah, that's another one that I'm kind of, but I don't know if there's consensus among us, so.
Well, why would you hold it back then? You want consensus on everything?
Well, I would think to, cause we're doing the resolution as a board, right, so we'd have to have,
Majority.
yeah, majority on the board, yeah.
It's something to think about. I didn't mean to ruin
Yeah.
full of ideas, but we really need to do that one.
How about, so next meeting, starting in April, would give us April and May, if anybody has a resolution that they think should be submitted to the VSBA.
One of the things we talk about a lot, and I don't know if a resolution makes any difference, but we might check out, and Julie certainly could do this, but is truancy a real issue of interest to administrators in Vermont or school boards? And if it is,
Yes. And the state's attorneys in Vermont and family courts in Vermont are less interested. So we do a lot of work across the state and in regions, and we have, we have county-wide teams that look and put things in place for kids. But in terms of anything legislatively, I don't know
I don't know.
where that would go.
I just think, and we're wandering here, but judiciary might be quite interested to know that some states' attorneys kind of throw them in the wastebasket when they get them. Apparently that never happened, but some of them were reluctant. And I think that it might be important enough that it becomes unreluctant. And
The Department of Children and Families has downgraded it as to something they don't have action on unless it rises to a particular level.
it might create a
Right.
good discussion in the
It's a good
legislature.
I wonder if we put on the agenda, and discuss this, but just the idea of topics to be generated.
Yeah, that'd be
you know,
good.
And then we could go from there.
And we have people in this county on a delegation who are on judiciary.
Yes, we do.
Athletics committee was expressed, put on for the ad hoc, and
I just wonder if we just have schedule updates more frequently to the board. Because I would worry that it could, I think the board would want to hear, and the public would want to hear the updates.
I'd like to have a little discussion and see people's opinions on that. I personally, I'm trying, when I look at these committees and, I was just trying to be careful and I don't like micromanagement. And I don't want our administrative staff to feel like they're being micromanaged. But I also feel that, you know, we should know what's going on as well, and be informed, so. The athletics committee one, I've been kind of tossing back and forth in my mind of, do we really need this, or do we need to be more informed? And, you know, maybe, hey, John, this is what the, you know, the board would like to hear about what's going on with athletics, or, you know, is there a major problem, you know, that, you know, is a problem brought forth by more than just one parent that's going on in our athletics, or, but that's just my opinion, and I kind of wanted to hear what everybody else thought and their opinion on it. I'm torn on that one, so.
So I would suggest we scrap the legislative committee, and as Julie said, let's get ideas out for resolutions and take care of that.
Yep.
I don't think it necessarily needs a committee, we'll know. And let our administration, Julie or whoever, keep us up to date and tell us when we might not want to, may need to discuss legislation, but it's just a thought.
She's asking
Can
about
I add that,
athletics.
I'm sorry, on the 5 years that I served on the board, we did have an athletics committee, and it was very informative to have that committee. Actually, that was one of the committees that I served on, so it actually was busy, busier than you'd think it would be, the athletics, but that's a big part of our student population.
Athletics committee. We're talking about athletics committee.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I'm sorry, Jody, what?
She's wondering if we should.
Don was just
I
asking.
just question,
What committee?
did you say when you were on the board they have an athletics committee
Yes, sir.
at MVU?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Devin, I'm gonna go around.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure. You know, if it's just for updates on programs and developments, like we have written here, then I think probably if we want to prioritize that more than, you know, just a presentation here, conversation with us, with the full board would be good. I guess I'm curious, you know, I don't have any experience with the athletics committee, so I'd be curious to know what the purpose of the prior athletics committees may have been, and to know if that's something we'd want to replicate or not. So I want more information, I guess.
Dawn?
It's pretty much been a high school thing, and we didn't have a committee per se, but there was a group of the board who was interested in it. Not all the board. I saw that athletic committee receive updates on programs and development. I think we spent more time to have input before the update came. An update says that the athletic director administrators do something, and then they come and tell the committee. And our attempt was not to work that way. It was to get the horse out in front of the cart, and I think we had some success. And then Julie came on, and I know that we have talked, even on MVSD, that there are certain things that need to happen in athletics before they go public. That hasn't always happened, but I think we're making progress. So I don't know what the role of the athletic committee would be. Would it be meet with the athletic director and principal and find out if we're gonna field a softball team, or 2 teams, or 3 teams, or no teams? So I don't know. Are we gonna be a reactionary information gathering? Or are we going to meet and maybe hear about things before they're implemented? So I don't know which way we want it.
Joanne?
You know, I don't want to get into a confidential information, but many times the board heard about athletic events at the athletic event.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be on that kind of committee.
Well, so I agree with Dawn, you know, just, maybe this committee, you know, could hear about what are the thoughts that are being, you know, thrown around, or what's happening, you know, with, what are the comments being made out in the community. And then there's another part of me too that is thinking, like, not just MVU athletics. Like, I know we have the rec departments. I mean, the rec departments has to do with our students. I still get confused with the funding for the rec department. So I guess, and I think sometimes it depends on sports, but I just think that athletics in a whole is more than just Missisquoi. So there's information there.
So I think I would just prefer at this time to probably see a little bit more, we have a fall, winter, and spring season. So I kind of would like to hear about them 3 times a year at a full board meeting, just an update. That's kind of my thought on it. Although, in the back of my mind is kind of what Joanne just said. I do think that some attention would be good for our 5-6 level. If we're gonna do 5-6 school sports, I think I would like to see us put our best foot forward on that, and I think there's an opportunity possibly for that. I don't know if the committee's needed, but I think one thing with the committee though, it does kind of, it does indicate that the board has a focus on something and really would like to see the administration move on a certain direction. So I don't think I'm ready personally for a athletic committee, but I do think that there's potentially some room there at some point for athletic committee, and I'm thinking more as far as 5-6, finding some harmony between the high school athletic program, middle school athletic program, and 5-6 athletic programs. I have a bigger vision. I've always seen as some sort of an assistant athletic director with dedicated responsibilities over 5, 6, and 7, 8. But so I don't see right now a committee, but that's just me.
So we got Peter, Renick, and Joanne, or Megan. Next. Sorry.
Yeah, I was really, what Toby said when he started, I'd like to see, like, to start the year, in the fall, what sports are coming up, and what happened in the spring. What happened in that, and then, maybe November, December time frame when the winter sports are starting, how did the fall sports go, what happened, did we have issues, what are the great things that happened, what are the, what's gonna happen in the winter, and then the same thing in the spring. So if we had those 3, but again, that's MVU. I don't know what you wanna do for the elementary schools. I don't think we have to do any big presentations for there, maybe once a year. And when we're at that, like when we're in Franklin, if the rec committee wanted to come in and do a short presentation, I think that's fine. I'm not against athletic committee, but maybe we should just see how this goes first before we jump into it.
You want to let Megan go first?
Megan, you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks. Sorry for joining late. The registration night ran a bit longer than expected. So just my 2 cents on the athletic committee. I'm not sure if a committee is the answer, but I don't like feeling like I'm in a reactionary state, and hearing about things when they happen or after they've happened is something I would like to avoid. I think it should be the goal of any board to be proactive and get ahead of things. So I don't feel like having a season recap is sufficient, because I want to know what's coming, what programs are being discussed, are there any issues that we foresee, and certainly MVU is more involved with athletics just because it's the high school level, but there are issues at the elementary level too that have an impact on seasons because of staffing concerns or a lack of an athletic director. So I don't know if the committee is the right avenue, but I feel like that is an area where we don't get information in a timely manner and at a point where we can actually weigh in and hopefully help the situation.
See, when MVU had its own board, we would get reports from the athletic director to the full board. Sometimes they were brief, sometimes they created discussion. So I don't know, but I'm just responding from what Megan says. I think it's, the athletic director kind of runs the show, at least at the middle school and high school. It's always nice to have them come in early in the process and share what they plan to be doing. But
So maybe a pre-season is what I'm hearing, and then after season update, and see how that goes as opposed to a committee.
Just out of curiosity, when you were on the athletic committee, what was the bulk of the discussions that was happening?
I was trying to go back into my memory bank, but a lot of times we were the conduit between the athletic director and the board, so that that committee would meet, just focus on whatever items may have came up, whether it was in addition to football, we went through that whole thing. The whole athletic director job itself, the description. But a lot of times mid-season, it was just our committee, what we would do at the beginning of meetings, the committees would speak. We would hear from the athletic director just in our committee, but then we as the committee would report to the board. These are the numbers you have for soccer, and this is what's going on, just the big kind of overarching items, instead of having the athletic director come every meeting or, every quarter. It would be more our committees, just any big items that we needed to bring in front of the board. So it was kid items to, uniform, just a lot of the inner workings of the programs.
Have we had a presentation from the athletic director?
Yes, in written reports. I do want to make sure that, decisions that administrators are supposed to be making should be made by administrators. And so that's always the challenge, and that was not always the history when we were a supervisory union, because it's a lot easier to get into that. So I think I have a lot of notes, and I think I can certainly be bringing proposals back to the board about how we will be reporting out and getting pre-information and getting input. I think that the couple times a year that we do it is clearly not enough.
So just maybe then, instead of making it potentially like a full committee, just maybe more regular updates, and then maybe see how that goes.
Right, that's where I was saying is if we could get, like Megan said, a pre-season update, and maybe in that update, if there's anything that any of the schools are finding a struggle, like they need help, or they need uniforms, or they need equipment, or so forth or so on, and then after season, an update. And what Peter said, a little presentation probably from like the Highgate, Swanton, and Franklin, so that it's not just all MVU.
And would it be worthwhile to the board, because I had met with Mr. Palmer this week, and hockey came up, and how we lose for like school choice. We lose a lot of students to want to go to BFA because it's D1, like maybe at least kind of also seeing how that would tie in, like the athletics and some of the issues, or how that affects like the high school a little bit more. Just because it's, a lot of the focus should be on MVU sometimes, and what of that is controllable and what of it like is not, just in terms of like other things that we're doing, maybe part of that discussion or update.
Division status is told to us by VPA based on our
population.
Our population. We can petition, but it has to do with a lot of factors, like you're winning, are you beating everyone in Division 2? Well, they might bump you up to Division. So again, that gets back to Toby's concerns with VPA sometimes. But there are a lot of things that we can certainly bring to the board that we haven't. And I think that message is clear.
Is everybody good with that pre-season and after season and hearing from each school?
I just think what Peter was saying is like combining those though.
Mhm.
He wasn't saying two separate.
Oh, okay.
Because fall season ends, winter starting. So like, we were thinking that could be a recap of the fall season and a forecast of what's
Okay.
coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, the way I heard you say it was like,
No, we
Beginning
wanna know, we
and-
wanna
right.
know about pre-season and after
yes,
season.
yeah, we were saying
Right.
to,
Yeah.
I'm
Not
just,
saying, oh no, not
Peter's saying
it's-
that for more efficiency and less.
Not in
less-
separate meetings,
yeah.
but knowing, hey,
Yeah.
all right, we're getting ready for this season, we just finished this season, so it'd be like a recap in one.
And also any program changes, right? Before, you'd want that in December as you're building the budget, and you want to be
Right.
able to communicate about that. Okay, it's on my list.
Always goes back to the budget.
And then negotiations committee.
We don't need it next
We don't need it, yeah,
I put it on there just to remind people,
okay.
because sometimes we meet 3-4 times a week because of all the committees.
4H one.
State healthcare delegate.
Yeah.
That's only as needed,
That was
it's like,
right.
that's just a vote.
I don't know if they negotiate last year.
I don't think they're negotiating right now for the state, so you're on the hook.
I don't think they have, well, I'm not sure. You never know. Okay.
No, it really is, the state, what did I do? I got carried away. It's a phonics instruction, you know, like 2 syllables I want to have.
All right.
Okay, so
So-
we made a lot of progress, I know that was kind of slow. Yes, but it's good to have that.
I'd rather have everybody's input and see what, and have them be able to speak. All right, so next we got the Franklin project updates. Peter and Don.
Did you
Put
want,
it on the board, or on the screen.
can you do it?
I didn't join the meeting, I'm sorry, but I can really quickly.
I accidentally unjoined because my computer turned off and on again, so it kicked me out.
Second, I got it.
This is way too small on our screen.
Okay, no problem. I should have marked that.
Can I ask a question while that gets sorted?
Yeah.
Just because I missed the beginning, were there any other committees, like erected any appointments? Or are we good with like the facilities and finance, or is that what we're sticking with?
We did a we signed you up for like 3, 4, 5 different things. No, we signed up the student success or,
Committee that you wanted to be on,
Yeah.
you are on that.
Awesome, thank you.
And we're gonna table the more
computers?
executive committee for the
That
next
kills
one.
me, I swear.
Okay,
Usually it goes real quick.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Tiny chairs.
Did we put Megan on the policy committee?
No, I told her, we signed her up for everything.
Policy, yeah, that's great. I served on that a few times. But now the policies are pretty much in place, but there was a time when VSBA was trying to put their first document together.
And they renew them, they review them, they change them, we have to look at them. There are a couple that we have to do every year to renew and update, so, yeah.
All right, see, we're in Franklin. We thought it would be good to do a expansion update. I don't know if you want to go, can you get that first?
I know Joyce, come here.
Okay, that better not become the joke.
It won't go.
I actually taught computers 100 years ago.
There we go.
All right, so here we go, construction updates. So the expansion has been approved by the Vermont Agency of Education, which is a big hurdle, and we're very pleased with that. So we are going to be breaking ground in June. So just to look back, the project is projected to be finished in August of 2024. And remember that this is entirely funded through the federal ARP ESSER program. And this is an ideal use of that because it's heavily regulated and monitored, and this space is approved for the support of an intervention for students, so we've got more space to do that. And we've been, that has been impacted by COVID. Obviously, we had constraints here before, so this is a huge, for MVSD and the Franklin School, it's a huge upgrade and advance for our school. So next one.
Can I just say that this, I want to make sure this was a little flyer, so this little piece, this little flyer that JR created, that was, we are going to push out, if you're agreeable, to the community, families, and all the websites tonight or tomorrow, if the board is okay with that.
It's a nice rendering. Been having weekly meetings between the MVSD administration and EEI, including the EEI site superintendent, assistant site superintendent, and project manager, the Franklin facility director, Franklin principal, and the MVSD business manager. So they've been meeting weekly, and then monthly our MVSD facilities committee has been getting updated by EEI and all the players involved, and that's where this came from. MVSD reviewing progress invoices with EEI project manager and Franklin facilities director monthly, so that has also been happening. So that behind the scenes, a lot of stuff has been going on. I want to go to the next slide. So we've got local zoning and state stormwater permits approved. Vermont fire and safety construction permit has been approved, and coordination is mostly complete with all the vendors and everybody that's going to be involved. And we'll be working through the summer programming and construction site access. So we'll be going on while summer programming is happening. Go to the next. So just a list of our major contractors that have been hired. ECI, Crestone, apparently has a local crew right here in Franklin. DMC Electric, Certified Steel Erectors, Vermont Mechanical, Nolan Contracting, and Optimum Testing. And then finally, developing specific project schedule is going on now. The plan is to start on June 19th. I believe that's end of school. There may be some work that may be able to happen beforehand. That's still to be determined. And anticipated to be all weather tight by early November. And then a stretch goal for EEI is to try to turn over the school on June 1st, 2024, with hopefully just minor works still going on through the summer of 2024, but it is scheduled to be absolutely completed by August of next year. So that's just a quick update on what's going on with the Franklin project.
Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome.
Super exciting. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Just want to say good
Oh,
job
did
to
you need,
on that.
did you need us to say yes or no for the flyers?
Not a vote, but I just wanted to get consensus that it was okay.
We're posting the construction permit on the front window on Friday, so I'd really like to have that get out, because that'll take care of a lot of questions. Yeah,
Joyce
what,
was saying
what
that-
expansion?
That needs to be.
Yeah, that's what, yes, that's a good idea, actually.
Pulling off, so, yeah.
Oh, it's well done. It's a nice flyer to be able to send out to the public.
can we get a copy in our drive to see? Or it's the first
It's on
page,
there.
right?
It's linked in
but-
there.
Yeah.
Oh, I can pop one, like a better copy.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that'd be awesome, thank you.
And the,
The JR is on paternity leave. We'll get it out.
I have an email drafted already to go to Rusty and.
just an update on facilities, so we will be meeting on the first because our board meetings moved, so we're gonna meet on the first Tuesday of every month.
Some months, we're gonna talk about, we need to move some to the first, so we'll make some adjustments around that.
Yep.
Of course.
For fast and flexible.
Are we? That's what we are.
Sounded good.
It sounds like you're nimble.
It's one of our goals.
When do you start? When do you start meeting, the first Tuesday?
Yeah, next week.
The 4th, yeah,
The fourth?
that should be a quick one.
So next on the agenda is contract approval, a teacher contract approval.
Yes, we have a process that we've had for a couple of years. We have, in this case, we would be getting approval before a contract has been issued, but typically, when we're hiring, we're fast and furious, and every month you, or every time you meet, really, you will have a group of teachers that you will approve. Generally after the fact, following the process, we have, interview committees, we have teaching of lessons or appropriate, meeting, so that you can see what the person can do in their role, and meeting with Bonnie to talk about the conditions of employment, and then meeting with me before they come to the board. So this is our very first one of the school year, and this is Charles O'Brien. Charles O'Brien is a guidance counselor who will be replacing Cindy Rose in Swanton Elementary. She's retiring, and I met with him last week, and he's terrific. So we're excited to be bringing him to the board for approvals, and we'll be issuing a contract.
Julie, is this a full-time position?
Yes, it is.
Was it? Was Cindy full-time?
Cindy was not, because she had requested not to
Right,
be.
no, I knew
Right.
for years she did.
So that was part of the budget, is that we increased it by a point two. Other positions throughout the district decreased, so it wasn't a net increase.
Did you mention where he came from?
Where he came from, he's currently interning in Orchard School in South Burlington. A year-long internship with, actually, it's nice, they have a K2 and 3-6 mentor for him, so he's getting exposure to all of it. And he's very excited to be coming to Swan. I always ask specifically why this position, why our district. Yeah, he was pretty excited.
If you'll entertain the motion, I'll make it to approve the contract for Charles O'Brien. Or authorize, I should say, to authorize board chair to sign the contract for, that, for,
You can approve, and then that's what happens.
okay.
The board chair signs
Signs.
them as we move them through the process, and
Oh.
then we approve them often retroactively,
Okay.
which we discussed
I think it's
before
approved,
with
we
our
really
attorney.
want to do.
What's that?
I think you really want to approve the contract.
Yeah.
All right,
you do, yeah.
all right, make a motion to approve the contract for Charles O'Brien for guidance counselor.
That way, if it doesn't work out, the board chair's on the hook.
I'll second.
We did talk about Cindy retiring. Oh, let's vote. I just wanna say, when did she retire?
At the end of the year.
She will.
She will be,
Oh.
yeah.
Okay.
40 years, maybe?
Yeah, I just wanted to say she's great.
She's a
I miss her.
No more road skips.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 8-0. And administrative contracts, possible finding for executive session.
So we would look for a finding to discuss the increase in executive session for those contracts.
That's it then, we're going into executive session for that, that's what we're looking for, or?
That's,
Future agenda items?
Oh,
no, it would be
Make a motion.
when it's time to go in executive session.
Okay. Yeah.
Technically, you're supposed to make a finding that it's appropriate for executive session, and then you make a motion to go into executive session.
So when we go out of executive session, we'll talk about future board meetings, is that what we're doing? or
No, we're not going into executive session now, we're just,
Oh, okay, we're just
We're,
going.
we're saying that this is a finding that's
All
for
right,
executive
okay.
session, yeah. Then, so next we would go into the future agenda items. So far we have new teacher hires. Any other suggestions?
we talked about topics for resolutions.
Yeah. Continue the executive committee suggestion. And then if anybody has any suggestions to send them forward by next Thursday.
Well, before, because we meet before that.
We meet Wednesday, so, yeah.
We also have a presentation from Highgate on science and outdoor education that will be planned for our next board meeting.
Does that tie into the outdoor project?
Yep.
And we sent the Highgate,
We can find it next time.
right, but we're gonna go over the
Yes, and the and the-
Highgate candidates.
The board representative, yes.
And have them come in for an interview.
Yep.
Okay.
Julie, I don't know when you want to do this, maybe we want to wait later in the year, but we hired a new person to do personal learning plans.
Yes, you
it's
saw her
something.
in the fall.
Okay, so will she still be here next year?
Yes, MVU, I've already have planned what MVU's presentations will be in May, and
Oh, great, okay.
that's part of it.
That's what I'm interested in, yep. And I have one other, and Bonnie and I've talked briefly about it a few weeks, months ago. But at some time I would like to have a presentation, or at least information presented. I think we talked about in January of 2022, we increased everybody's pay as a support staff, right? Yeah, I would be interested in knowing how many of those, I don't think we should do names, okay, I'm not going there. But how many custodians that were there from January 1, 22 are still there now? And you know how to break them down better than I do, but I think of custodians as one group, paraeducators as another group, whatever. I'd just be interested to see the data, as I say, not by names, but number
The
of
retention
positions.
data would be
Yeah.
great information. She's making a note, she's making plans already.
She already did it.
No.
I didn't hear
It's
you.
in the
Bonnie.
drive. I'm kidding, I was making a joke, she typed so fast, we said she's already done.
No, I think she had, because she told me at one point she was working on it, so I figured
Yeah,
probably. was
she
in the
does
file
exit
somewhere.
interviews with teachers, you know, she compiles a lot of that
Yeah.
information, so I think that's fabulous to get.
Got a good start for
Do
next.
we have a lot of retirements this year, or do we won't know that for another month?
Not yet. You know, usually retirements we get fairly early. To date, we only have 4.
That's our 10-year cycle. We had
There
it
was a lot last year.
Had it last year.
With the Vistas changes last year, there was a lot of retirements.
You'll hear 10 years from now, 9 or 10, you'll see it happening.
Yeah, you said that, the cycle.
You'll just be beginning, yeah. When you start saying, I remember when we hired that.
And then we have future board meeting, will be April 11th at Highgate Elementary Library at 6 p.m.
We have a board meeting calendar that we talked about. Because, for example, the second and fourth meeting of the month in April, we already talked about it last time, the second week, the fourth week of the month is school vacation. So it might be a quicker meeting because you won't have any principals or anyone there. People have made arrangements and plans, you won't have students and so forth. But we want to try and avoid that for the most part in the future. So the next one that would really be a change would be June, if we could move to the 1st and 3rd for June. And what I'll do is, if you agree to this, then I'll make sure we publish it, so it's not like every month, we're like, I don't know what month it is. But because of graduation and the last week of June, everyone's gone. Like, that's when you can use the end of your vacation, and a lot of people, actually, there's a lot of professional development that happens outside of the school district, you know.
I was on Zoom last time and I did
Yeah.
hear the rationale for moving it. I know I did comment on the holidays, but did we change it for a specific reason?
Swanton.
It conflicts with Swanton.
Okay, so how many board members have ever been to a Swanton Select Board meeting?
Couldn't it the same night?
I didn't hear you, Peter.
Just kidding.
He said couldn't because it's on the same night.
Well, you know, we did go. I think Terry may have gone one year. And what you do is, if you ask to be on early, I guess we didn't ask, but it was good, Laura and I went. I'm not sure that we want to be going to a lot of select board meetings. They have pretty full agendas. And I think they gave us a courtesy, but I don't think they'd want us showing up there 4 or 5 times a year. Maybe Laura's perception is different, but I think we really talked budget. We could have talked about a lot of things.
Maybe twice.
So I don't know why we would change our meeting night.
I think it was also, I remember Terry saying that when she had brought it up before last year of changing
Yeah, we
the
did.
meetings, is that because of the conflict with that people were saying they couldn't come to our meetings, so hopefully.
It's okay because, you know, once upon a time, we just used to skip out it when we were in Swanton. When this board cycles in Swanton, you just go down and they start and take 15 minutes, come on.
So Don, didn't you say that I'll call it annual meeting or whatever, that we have before town meeting, we wanted to make sure and schedule that?
We needs to work on the schedule, they asked us to work on the
Right, so we
schedule
could
because
be
of town
there.
and village.
Yeah.
We used to be part of that group before Acts 4 or 6 or whatever. So that's something, I guess, a future agenda item to work on.
That may help us in Swanton,
It's the first day of school. I
if we
wrote
can
it.
participate.
So I think that the recommendation that's here is that we have June be the 1st and 3rd. I think the next one where we make that change is just December. Because again, the holiday. Thanksgiving actually works out, the November meeting works out for the 2nd and 4th. February, I think the 1st and 3rd again because of the February break, and then we also have our budget informational meeting during that 4th week, so it's really just 3 months that it's a change. And we would, you know, we would publish this somehow, and, you know, I'd like to make a version that also has committees on there with different colors and.
That'll be too much.
That'll be
Can't
too
handle
much.
that.
We also have, you all have Google calendars where we have invites and you can, you know, see them on your Google calendar too. So if that will work as our regular meeting schedule for everyone.
Looking for a motion on this?
I'll get on the computer.
If we have a motion, I think it makes
still
it,
don't like changes.
if they're not special meetings that way, if the calendar's adopted.
Then I'll make a motion to adopt the schedule as presented.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
So you ran it, that seconded it?
Yes.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 8-0.
No, I voted no.
Oh, no.
You didn't, you didn't
Oh, I'm
ask
sorry.
no vote second. I voted no.
Can we do that again? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Don. Motion carries 7-1.
7-1, yeah. Thank you. I just wanted to avoid, should have said this before, I just wanted to avoid the, oops, we should reschedule, oops, we should reschedule, you know, like we do every year for town meeting. So this way it's just set. Something
What
will
was the
happen.
other month?
We'll see.
June?
Something will happen, Peter.
June, December, and February.
February, okay, thank you.
I will,
There's another snowstorm coming, so.
I'll make sure and send it out to our board members and make sure we put it in the calendar appropriately so people will pop up for people.
Okay, so, do we need a motion to go into executive session?
Yes, we do.
Would somebody like to make a motion to go into executive session at 8:21 PM?
I will make that motion to discuss administrative contracts.
Inviting in,
I'm assuming the superintendent and Julie, who else would you need?
Bonnie?
Bonnie?
Yep.
Okay. Anyone else, Julie?
No.
That's it.
so first from Toby.
Second, anybody?
I'll second
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 8-0.